So, this is gonna be about a dream I had, but if possible, I'm gonna try to squeeze as many topics as possible in one video. I may sound sick because I am sick, or at least I was, but I'm not really anymore. Anywho, so this was a couple months ago now. I had a dream about the coming famine, and I was pretty much laying on the floor. Don't know where, don't know in what building, but I was laying on the floor, and I was reaching out, and I was hungry, and I was dying pretty much, and there was that. It's kind of interesting though, because due to hypoglycemia, technically I'm supposed to, I won't even say that I would die quicker than other people, but technically I should have died from that, but it's kind of weird though. I guess it's the same way that I always miraculously survive stuff, but I'm trying to figure out how to put this. I should die sooner because of it, but even before I knew that I had blood sugars as low as I do, and I was just getting gaslit about the metabolic issues or the iatrogenic metabolic issues in general, I still very often wouldn't eat that much, or not as much as I wanted to. So it's kind of interesting. So maybe I wouldn't die sooner than everybody else, but one of the things, to get to the point, that's not that I really care, but one of the things that I've thought about that would scare a lot of people is that technically I supposedly would die sooner than a lot of other people would in the coming famine, but that's kind of whatever though. And that's all I remember from that. So anywho, more recently, 1/13/26, pretty much it was racial. So I remember little bits and pieces. I was supposed to be going to jail for being in an area that I shouldn't be in. And of course, let me not go on a rant. And fast forward, I don't know though, because this is it kind of gives racial KKK, Freemason, and Marine Kingdom type vibes, to be honest. But some Arabic boy who I liked and met before, I cannot read this because I wrote this down really fast. Okay, he was singing some cultural song at the airport, and I had met him before, I guess traveling or whatever. His dad was watching him perform some song in this airport because his dad wanted him to get signed. This doesn't have anything to do with most of anything. So that's what was happening though. And then I saw someone I know and their boyfriend. Well, I really don't even know this person. I'm just trying to get to the point where there was surprise. I wondered if she was okay. I think I remember now. So she was surprised by how good he was at singing, and it was a racial thing. And kind of due to racial programming, people are made to pretend or actually feel like other people aren't as talented as they are, or other people groups aren't as talented as they are, or even more talented. And so he was singing those type of East African or Northeast African, or I guess now they call it Middle East or Asian notes where I don't even know how to put it. Like Indians have this as well, where it's like a certain way they sing and something with the vocal cords. It's also known to have been done in Egypt, ancient Egypt, and also with the new Ishmael and Canaanite overlords. They also have that form of singing, but I can't remember what it's called. I'll put a video in the description if I can find one. And so anywho, this person and their boyfriend was surprised that he was as good at singing as he was. And I said something about how I met him before. I'm trying to see what this really says right here. And my older neighbor sister was there. And this is where it started to get kind of drifty. So, she said something along the lines of, don't be, quote unquote, don't be scared to date outside your race if a black dude something, and doesn't accept you for something, because white guys and others like your culture. And so this is already a no-no for me. Now, to be truthfully honest, I'm not gonna lie, in like Jezebelic family systems, often nobody really knows each other, and everybody's putting on acts and fake gays to try to either avoid being the scapegoat or just to keep the dysfunction going. But I don't really think that's something that she would say, to be truthfully honest, but I really don't know. But I just know that's not something I would go for anywho. I do know that, like, due to the generational trauma-based mind control of Willie Lynch syndrome, house nigger programming, and the feminine thug persona, and the different things that I call this different stuff. Like, there is the colorism and stuff, and this is really common. I didn't go through this, but my older neighbor sister, she even has her own videos where she talks about going through the whole you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl stuff due to the programming that people are under. Especially in, I think, Georgia. She went through this a lot. And definitely I would say nothing's changed with those people, but those people being people in GA. Or at least the school kids. But anywho. So, like, I don't know, just for a lot of reasons it doesn't sound like something she would say. But actually, no, that's not the point I was getting at. The point I was getting at is that I could get how, like, people could go into this, like I talk about with the dudes and the quote-unquote black dudes, and them having the typical Jezebelic quote-unquote black mom, and so then they have trauma around quote-unquote black women. Also just the fact that, especially, like, depending on the environment they grow up in, they're probably surrounded by a lot of quote-unquote black women that are very overtly Jezebelic, and so then they just rather not date any of them. There's also pairs involved, because this also makes some of them try to, like, go for people who are too young for them, who aren't, like, really toxic yet. But anywho, so they get with quote-unquote white women who are also Jezebelic, and if not as much more than their mom was, and they just they repeat the pattern, but they feel like they're not, because they feel like not dating someone who's like their mom and the other women they're around is like them escaping the torture. And then of course they're Jezebelic themselves, so just like that. But also, as I've mentioned, a lot of women do something similar, because I mentioned plenty of times before over the years, like meeting just different melanated women who say that they don't date quote-unquote black dudes because they have issues with women because of their moms, or because of the whole thing with them walking around with their butt out. Then, of course, there's the thing with, like, people being told they don't act black enough, and of course, if they're not white, then they're not white enough. And I notice that, like, often quote-unquote mixed people, because I really hate the term mixed for a lot of reasons. One, it gives the idea that that Negroes come from other groups and not the other way around, because realistically all groups come from Negroids, so there really isn't a such thing necessarily as mixed features or quote-unquote white features. Like I've talked about, there's no such thing as Asian eyes, as people like to say. it's just a lot of confusion. But anywho, often they'll feel like they're the only ones who like experience this type of stuff because being pushed out due to colorism or people being jealous of them because they feel as though they're going to be treated better because, not even really because they're light skinned, but because they're mixed. But sometimes being light skinned could also go hand in hand with that. But you don't have to be mixed to be light skinned either. But there's that side. Or even people who are lighter feeling that they're better than darker people because of the Willen syndrome, house nigger programming that all melanated people of different ethnic groups are under. And so a lot of people fall into these things of like these ways, of like feeling like they have to date these other groups because maybe they also are kind of actually attracted to them because they feel they have more in common with them, but it's always like some subconscious and subconscious and covert racial programming that other quote-unquote race is under. And so that can cause like some hidden issues. The kids are going to go through as much hell, typically more than they would with the usual toxic quote-unquote black-on-black duo, I guess I could say. And so they're still going to come out traumatized and beat on, and there's still going to be domestic violence. Or like they date the person and then eventually one day they call them the N-word or whatever else. Different stuff like that to where it's really not worth it and I'd rather just be single. But I understand how people like end up in this situation. Or like a lot of people go through, maybe you'll run into a quote-unquote white person or whatever group that's actually honest and would just say that they don't date quote-unquote black people. And a lot of people get offended by that, but I've always said, I was even told this once when I was like 10, I've always said that I don't really got people get offended by that though, because realistically, like, I know that it's too late for this and that we already screwed up, but even in the Old Testament it talks about the whole race thing wasn't a thing, but it talked about not dating all these different groups, which a lot of the groups would still be the same quote-unquote race, but they were different ethnic groups. But more so, the issue is that all the other ethnic groups are pagans. And it's like, I don't really see how keeping the bloodline pure is necessarily an insult. I actually feel it's really weird when melanated people get offended by somebody saying that. Because to be truthfully honest, I would rather for somebody to keep their bloodline pure than to try to use me to get melanated people in their bloodline to keep their bloodline alive as the sun gets hotter, as a part of the earth's judgment. And I still have videos that I re-uploaded from another channel I had that are from like 2020 and 2021 of like quote-unquote white people talking about needing to keep their bloodline going and the sun getting hotter and how their kids and their offspring has to be melanated and stuff like that. I wouldn't even want to let anybody use me for something like that, and I'd rather force someone to keep their bloodline pure. But anywho, so there was that, and it was just really weird because it's not even something I would go for. Going back to the comment made by my older neighbor sister in the dream. But to get back to the point, wait a minute, where am I? Okay, so some white quote-unquote friend, or quote-unquote white friend, because I don't like the white and black labels that have been used to confuse people, but they obviously weren't a friend either, told me to go to their neighborhood, and then I'm chased out by people threatening me and calling me the N-word. I run and see a Knights Templar banner flag thing outside in no KKK, Catholic Church, and Freemasons, because all those things are connected. The Knights Templar Freemasons under the Catholic Church. or the KKK, and they all use the hooked X and all that stuff. So I run to the bus stop, but I can't do that because their dogs are trying to attack me. But they were on a chain though. And this is actually really interesting because this does make me think about a couple experiences I've had recently and just throughout the past few years of traveling. Like I mentioned, all the things that happened in Santa Cruz since my first day, from the whole situation of being told to go back to Mexico every single day since my first day there. Like in the video titled, I don't even remember what it's titled actually. Actually, no, I think it's titled Orange is the New Araha, Nice Tint though, something like that. So there was that. But the more serious situations was like those Scottish or Swedish or whatever people with the dreadlocks. And I noticed that the wife was wearing a kilt too, but I thought only the dudes wore that. But anywho, they had like 10 dogs or something on leashes, and they let their dogs off the leash to chase me back when I was in Santa Cruz because, quote unquote, they've never seen a ninja before. And she said that they were saying hey, and then she screamed at me and told me to stop running because I was going to get her dogs lost. And that's one of many situations that I remember. And then of course there was a recent one, well, like me walking down the street and that dude who was pushing the baby stroller when I was walking down the sidewalk. And I already know, like, to try to not walk behind quote-unquote white people anyways due to stuff like this. And then, like, I don't know, there's a lot I could say about that, but then their house was, like, on the side of the road, and I didn't even know it was a house at first, to be honest, because it was the only house right there. Like, it was right in front of a hospital, so I guess they got it built there just because. And so he went to the house while I was walking down the sidewalk to get his wife to come outside to confront me with their kids, and they were talking about, no, she was talking about some, you can't be over here because we have kids. And first of all, something that I hate, just in general, is like people don't give a crap about their kids. I know it's not even really the point, but like people don't give a crap about their kids. And something I noticed is that whenever somebody's trying to like play scared victim, they'll often like bring up their kids or somebody's kids. And that can even go back to the whole street kids aren't seen as kids. Not really in this situation, but in other situations, the whole street kids aren't seen as kids thing that I mentioned pretty often. It does like go hand in hand. Because I know I've mentioned before in other videos, like people acting like you may be a risk or a danger because you're homeless to their kids that are even way older than you are. But this is a different situation, but it makes me think about that too. But anywho, she brought her kids outside and then her dog too to tell me some bull crap. And of course they try to intimidate you with the dog. That's why she brought the dog outside. In fact, no. I think the dude was already walking the dog and pushing a stroller, but then it's like she was trying to like chase me down with the dog, and then the police showed up, but by that time I had already got pretty far down the street to where I was walking to anyways. And so there was that. And those are just the two situations I remember right now, but like especially when I was in Cali, it was just like stuff every day like that. And that's where things got risky, but I still feel like it was one of the best places for my situation though. And so anywho, I'm trying to remember where I was at. So I ran to a building. So I ran to a building that seems to be a lodge. I see a window and two guards standing at the door with 2 swords. So like the way that these types of guards will often hold swords were like kind of like the guards or whatever they're called for like the Queen of England and the King and all those people. It was like that. They didn't have on gear though, I don't think. But I shouldn't have been able to see in the window from that angle anyways, but that's what I saw. They were standing on the inside of the lodge, so not on the outside. Which is interesting, but there was one on one side of the door and one on the other. Then I tried to walk, but a white guy comes up with a sacrificial knife or whatever, and tried to unalive me. And he was trying to unalive me while telling me that it's okay, and that he's not trying to unalive me while running up on me and totally trying to like slit my throat. And so there was it. This even almost reminds me of that dream that I had some months ago that I actually forgot about for a while, where like it was on the military people in one of those like military high-tech rooms, and this was the U.S. military, but higher-ups, and they were talking about how they should have never let the Middle East, quote-unquote, become a superpower. And this is definitely a recent conversation, and it goes hand in hand with everything that's about to go down. But I have some other things I could add in, though. And I forgot to mention, near the beginning, I guess I was being handcuffed on live TV. I guess I ran. I don't really remember, to be honest. Something else to throw in. I haven't made a video like this in a while, but I was doing a series, I guess, on different security companies that, of course, go hand in hand with the beast system. But as of right now, most people don't care because they just seem to be there to, like, keep homeless people away and put them in jail and physically attack them. It's worse in some places, like in places with higher homeless populations. It's worse. In more, like, rich white areas, I notice that like they're often out there, even if they're not rich, just like places with lower homeless and less melanated people. You may get lucky enough to be able to like go to a library and not see Abbott and Allied and police, and they're accusing people of loitering, and what else do they accuse people of? Trespassing, breaking and entering, if they feel like you're just using it as your house, quote unquote, because you're homeless. Like, even in Washington, I noticed that, like, there wasn't, like, any security at the bus terminal, and it was easier to sleep there, and it's easier to sleep in certain places in general. Although sometimes this could also be due to, like, there being lower infrastructure. But, anywho, I would talk about different security companies and security robots and the name of the companies and their logos, like, one called Ecoline. They have the stereotypical Eye of Providence symbol, the pyramid with the eye, as their logo. And inside this church-type resource center, I've seen that they have that type of security. Not Ecoline, but it's called Argus Security Group, and they use the Eye of Providence as well. And so that's something I could throw in. And so another situation, and I'm not gonna lie, I've noticed that every couple of years, I'm sure everybody knows this, they push new events to go towards, nothing I'm trying to say is coming out how I wanted to, I'm not gonna lie, like this whole video, but I'm gonna keep going. They do another event, another false flag event for Divide and Conquer, to push towards the quote-unquote race W at symbol R. And of course, I'm not one of those like quote-unquote white truther channels that likes to push these half-truths and these halfway told stories to keep the covert and subconscious racism going. I'm not like a call for an uprising or something, which honestly I believe that I believe a lot of people are plants, to be honest. I believe a lot of people that are making videos are plants. I don't consider myself a truther anyways, as far as most people could care. I'm just a mentally ill, traumatized, homeless kid anyways, I feel. Although, I guess before I escaped my abuse situation, I don't know what people consider me then, before I ran away. I guess the same thing, but without the homeless part. But I'm not like one of those people, so I do know that the only reason that like these agendas, or really anything, is able to happen is because of what's already in people's hearts. So, like the coming civil WAR agenda can only happen because of what's already in people's hearts, and honestly, it's going to revolve around way more than just a quote-unquote race anyways. In fact, I feel to a certain extent there's going to be more of other things involved, because of course, for a nation to fall, the judgment from Yah's for the people to fight each other. So, I mean, I've always talked about the real WAR between the real white supremacists at the top and then just the lower level Caucasians in general. That's always been what the fight's been about, well, to a certain extent. But really, it'll even be deeper than that, because people will be fighting over just different views and stuff like that. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, but anywho, like quote-unquote truther channels like that, they've been known to say a lot of very overtly racist things. I still remember one video where he was talking about how people of color get to run amok, and he's one of the many people, although he doesn't really identify with like all the church mainstream Christian stuff, but he's still almost the same, except he knows more truthful things than most people in religion do. That's the only difference. Like I remember he would often talk about how like Ice Cube agents didn't exist and different stuff like that, and how the news just put stuff out to make people racist. And it's like, well, people only really get upset about these different false flags and events, just like with the Charlie thing, because they're already racist. Saying that racism isn't real and that the real issue is that melanated people believe that racism is real and that's why white people are mad doesn't fix anything. And there's a lot I could say about that. So I'm not one of those people, because I know there's a lot of channels out there like that have confused people about this stuff for years, and it's like they're the usual religious people pretty much. Even the ones that try to be so separate from the mainstream Christian, Protestant, or whatever narrative, it's still all kind of the same. And that's one of many reasons why I wonder how many of these people are just plants. Because it's very common for, like, especially political plants, although this guy didn't consider himself one, but it's very common for political plants on the right to pretend that they're being censored when they're not. I mean, I even wonder how much L.T. Corbis was a plant, although for most of the whole shebang, starting when she was 11, or maybe 10, she always identified as an atheist anyways. But she still definitely exposed a lot of true things, but it's still kind of like, she looks like she's probably a J3W, but obviously she's Swedish. But I still wonder who's really real and who's not. But anyway, to get to the point though, all this stuff is going on, and I noticed that again, the September 11th thing is being brought up again and again. Of course, because they're planning another attack on citizens, but also to like get this back in people's heads so people can find something else to play victim about that their own government did, and of course, there's the whole new oil situation going on, and then, of course, like, they're never going to do a war on drugs in their communities. They're still going to be OD and stand on the side of the road shooting up in places like California all day, every day, unaliving themselves and doing white-on-white crime and calling it harm reduction. But, of course, for this new oil fiasco with that Latin American country that's going on right now, or I guess the situation's kind of almost over and done, but the excuse for that is the cartel, which that actually makes you think about a lot of propaganda that's going on. Like, a lot of people come to America to be racist. Like, those French people that I met that I mentioned before, I remember the 11-year-old was talking about how she heard about how dangerous Mexico was, and it's like, what do you know when you're from France? And it's like, it's a lot of narratives that are pushed. I'm not gonna say it's like the safest place, but I mean, the stories that I hear, it's like people go there to quote-unquote party, and then things end up happening to them. I would say if anybody's in the most danger, it's probably like another melanated person that they may try to like do something to try to make themselves feel more white adjacent, because that's a really common thing, especially with like quote-unquote black women going there and things happening. But other than that, it's a lot of games, and it's like gangs are they're all a part of the occult. Like El Chapo or the Pablo Escobar, those people are like high-ranking warlocks, and of course they did voodoo, and voodoo is Catholic. So it's like, I mean, shoot, I couldn't say that they're as bad as Aleister Crowley, but like, I mean, there's plenty of like famous European and American Luciferians and occultists, and it's like, what's really the difference between a Blood, a Crip, and a GD and those people, except they're more famous and they're more praised and worshipped. I mean, I can't think of like there is no famous person that's pushed down your throat that's not down with those boys. So it's kind of like people talk about the cartel and supposed cartel, but it's like, I mean, are they different from any other religious organization that's doing voodoo? I mean, shoot, if you want to talk about a gang, I mean, there's churches everywhere, there's schools everywhere, there's jobs everywhere, there's institutions everywhere, and they're kidnapping people more than anybody else is, aside from the gov. But anywho, so there's that one. What am I getting at? Oh yeah, and then I was watching this interview or podcast, and it was by the Diary of a CEO. He was talking to that weird sounding dude that sounds like he's been on like meth and steroids. Apparently he made the Sound of Freedom movie, which I've never watched. I already know it's gonna be some propaganda. It already, just from the stuff that I heard, it sounds like another way to downplay stuff and to like make high-level trap that's done by the gov and these different organizations seem like it's just about prostitution or something, or it's just about a third world country, and just ways to downplay stuff and misconstrue narratives. Not to mention, I don't trust any of those people. They're all down with those boys, so it's like, I mean, there's a lot I could say about that I have always said about that. Then they talked about how much the movie was censored, but that sounds like another situation of fake and censoring. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but it was still a watered down downplay of what really goes on. Honestly, there's plenty of horror movies out there that show a more realistic idea of what actually goes on. There's one movie that comes to mind, but I don't remember what it's called. I know it's about like rich people and rituals and masquerade parties. But anywho, but what I was gonna say is that, because I almost forgot, or I did forget actually, that dude mentioned on the whole September 11th thing. In fact, is he the same Nah, I think I'm getting mixed up. So now I can get to the point. This is another reason why just being the person that listens and people watches is a good thing, which that's going to be something you're going to do a lot when you're quote unquote homeless. So let me hear if I can get to the point. So 2 quote unquote white Christian and Catholic people were at the library, and I was there too, obviously, trying to learn the code, and they were having this conversation. He's the only other person I've ever heard say that he goes to the library to try to find somebody to date. I thought I was the only person that did that. It's probably not going to work out, but I don't need to be dating anyways. I'm too detached for that. Actually, nah, because I'm about to start ranting. At one point... Oh no, I'm screwing this all up. Let me read this in order. Guy was talking about how he got the DMV guy, the guy who owns the DMV, I guess. No, he got the DMV raided and got the guy who owns it put in federal prison for allowing people to get an ID and license without a birth certificate, because, quote unquote, that's how terrorists crash vehicles into buildings. So yeah, and it's like, and to be truthfully honest, with all the anti-immigrant and supposed immigrant, quote unquote immigrant, with all that stuff that's going on, it's like, I mean, I'm assuming the situation is probably really old, but especially in a place like this, like, I would be surprised if he was really letting that many people get IDs and stuff that weren't also quote unquote white. But either way, this is still really insane. In fact, the dude, by the time he got to this part of the conversation, he'd already been talking for over an hour about him getting people locked up and getting the FBI called on people. And it's like, can you just not call the police and just put the phone down for 1 second? He was talking about how he has friends that know people with a lot of money, and he's got the FBI on people before, and he could get some investigations done. And the FedEx people, he felt like they were punching his boxes, and he was going to get the FBI called on them and get them put in federal prison. And how I don't remember if it was him or the lady he was talking to, but one of them mentioned that, like, it used to be hard to get those types of delivery jobs, and they knew somebody that was on hold for 2+ years going through a FBI background check to become a package deliverer, and how things need to go back that way. But honestly, no, they really don't. People already can't get jobs. That's the worst thing right there that could happen. Waiting 2+ years to work for Amazon, and they're laying people off already anyways, and they're already acting funny about hiring. But anywho, so he was saying that, hold up, okay, I was eating chocolate, but he was talking about how his friends could help him get people sued. I already mentioned the 2+ year FBI background check. And then he started talking about how he was in college and he went to like 8 different colleges in different states, and he was also in the military, and how right before he left his dorm or something like that, he said a prayer for protection. And that same day, September 11th, the event, quote unquote, as I'm gonna call it, happened. And he said it's really ironic or something like that, how it happened right after he said a protection prayer and prayed for the nation. And it's like, this religious stuff really, it's like people are always saying white Christian nationalists and stuff like that, but honestly, I think something that people really have to think about is American nationalism, because one of the things about it is that Caucasian Americans don't like Europeans, and it's also vice versa. I mean, the same way people often hear about how Africans don't like supposed quote-unquote African Americans. Well, honestly, it's not really, that's kind of different actually, but it's still kind of the same vibe almost. But there's definitely different reasons behind those things. I mean, one thing I always mention is that Spanish is a European language, but yet you'll have racist, quote-unquote white Americans ask people things like, are you a normal white person or do you speak Spanish? Even though Spanish is a European language, so I would assume that normal white people, whatever that means, do indeed speak Spanish. In fact, I even met this guy, this was some months back when I was in LA the last time, or at least I think that was the last time, possibly not, and he's a European Spaniard, and he was talking about how people are always surprised that he's Spanish because he's white, or quote-unquote white, but he's actually Spanish compared to a lot of the people that, due to like confusion, not knowing history, and even just language barriers, that call themselves Spanish but aren't. In fact, if you really know the actual definition of Latino, a lot of people that are saying that they're Latino really aren't Latino. They may speak like the Spanish language due to conquering, but they don't actually, they very obviously are more Negroid, or maybe, well, I guess a lot of them could be considered Mongoloid by race, but some are definitely more Negroid or by race, or I guess a lot of people who don't want to be considered Negroid run under Mongoloid, but actually having like Greek and Roman and Latin roots, which is what Latino really means. Like a lot of the people who like claim the Latino label very obviously don't have that, and I mean, it's like Italians. I mean, by the definition of that, they're Latino, but nobody ever calls Italians Latino, so it's all really interesting. Okay, what was I talking about? Hold up. And I had actually heard this guy talk a couple times before, and it was always about how he used to stay in China and Japan when he was staying on the military base or something like that, and how they seem to have a lot of advanced stuff now, but he doesn't believe it because it wasn't that advanced when he was there, and it didn't look that nice when he was there, stuff like that. And just like these weird, like, racial conversations, pretty much. I don't even really know how else to put it. And it's like mostly a bunch of bull crap. And it's like it just shows the programming that people are under. And then he went on a rant about he's been staying in the same apartment for over 10 years, and how he thought it would help him find a girlfriend because it shows stability, and how someone told him just keep being stable and you'll get a girlfriend, just keep going to the library. I can't judge him for that though, because like I've been hoping for years that I find a boyfriend at the library, but I know it's not really that realistic, but still it's kind of funny. It even makes me think about how, like, for whatever reason, a lot of white people often out of nowhere like start going on these rants with me about how they would never date a Mexican, and I don't really care. I don't really like the whole idea that somebody has to date somebody or some certain group. I mean, I get like the actual racial programming behind it, like I can't mix because I'm the only human, because that's what the theory of evolution is actually about, as I mention often. In fact, the theory of evolution has a couple of different hidden meanings, from ancestor worship to, of course, the original racial side to it. But, like, I get the whole idea that everybody else is a monkey, or that I have pure blood, even though they have the Rh negative rhesus monkey blood, and the only melanated people with it have it from colonization. And I get how, like, thinking that you shouldn't mix because you're better than others, or I guess because other people aren't human, that could be the issue. But it's like, people don't even talk about that part because people don't even know what racism actually is or means. This is something that people run around saying. Most people don't know what a race is. Of course, still, like, the whole idea of the Negroid, Caucasoid, Mongoloid thing was created by white supremacists. It even makes me think back to that Christian Russian dude who would come in my comment section every now and then bringing that up, which is something I actually already knew. But of course, I guess he assumed that I didn't. And I don't even really know why people always want to come argue about Caesar Borgia. As I said before, it just shows how much people don't care about abuse or any of the things that I really talk about. But still, he mentioned the whole Negroid, Mongoloid, Caucasoid thing, and then try to say that even the Bible backs that up, and even the Bible says there are 3 races of people. No, it doesn't. The whole race thing was not a thing back then. There's the different ethnic groups, and then of course they'll also try to like play that game with the whole Moses thing and the Egyptian wife, and they'll try to make it seem like it's because the Egyptian wife was quote unquote black, which is weird because the same quote unquote white people that claim to be the people of the Bible and Moses and all those people and Jesus Christ, they also claim to be the Egyptians. And then when they started to realize that like a lot of people weren't like buying that game anymore, then they just started saying, oh well, they were Arabic. To be truthfully honest, you'll never meet, or at least I've never heard of an Arabic person ever claiming to be Jesus Christ or any of those people. In fact, the ones that really know the history, they already know that Adam and Eve were what would now be considered Negroid, and they'll tell you that they're running around Egypt claiming to be the people because they conquered Egypt, Ishmael and Canaan, because I don't even know if I could say the word, but Palestinians are Canaanites, not Arabs. Arabs are Ishmael. The Palestinians were in the land before they were in the, what's that place called? I don't even know if I could say that either actually, but the land, they were there before even true Yashara was, even before the actual Yashara, not the Swedish, Irish, and British people there now, but still those are even different people, and most people don't even know that. They think Palestinians are Arabs. And actually, no. There's something I'm supposed to be saying, but I don't remember what it was. But what this does remind me of is that other situation in Cali with that, of course, white savior, covert and subconscious racist liberal dude who told me that I sound like a racist white man when I say Arab instead of Arab. And it's like, well, it's really just a pronunciation, but it's like, you say that, but then he went on a rant about how it's black like the car across the street. And then he went on this rant about how he went to Latin America and how he traveled all over the world just to tell melanated people, even Mexicans. He said that he was telling them, you're not white, you're black. And shoot, that's not something that you can just say to a Mexican like that, but he said he was telling them. He went to different countries telling people that they were black and that they needed to stop thinking that they were white, after telling me that when I say Arab, I sound like a racist white man. That was really funny, to be honest, but anywho, I'm trying to remember what I was really getting at, though. Crap, I don't know. So, the lady he was talking to started talking about if the J3W-ish, because that's what I'm just going to call them here, the J3W-ish kids learn Christian laws, then it should also be vice versa. So, like, the Christians should also learn the J3W-ish people's laws, or supposedly their laws that they don't even believe the Bible, but of course that's like the narrative that's pushed. But it's still really interesting. It sounded like the topic was more so pagan Roman Catholicism than pagan Protestant. And then the lady started talking about, I mean, I could get what she means by this, but I don't really remember why it came up. How she met some Arab guy, and pretty much just like how they treat women, which, I mean, I totally get that, like, due to the religious program that people are under, they're taught to treat women and even younger guys and girls like crap. Because something I mentioned before is that what a lot of people seem to not know is that of course, obviously, in these places where, like, they openly admit that, like, they marry 8-year-olds, they also do the same thing to boys, but they just don't admit it out loud. They don't even consider it. Well, of course, they don't believe in the idea of being a quote-unquote pedo, but they don't consider liking dudes or even boys being gay because, well, for younger people, just like with the TALMUD, especially like, well, that's more stuff for babies in that book, but like, it's not considered fornication or even really committing a sexual act because they're so pure, quote unquote, to where you're like untainted, supposedly. And then I know for the girls, like, they always bring up this virgin stuff. I don't really know what their excuse is for when they essay or R-word boys and other dudes, but wherever there's one pedophilia, there's another. But one thing I will say, though, is that the only difference between the U.S. and these other countries is that they admit it. Here, like, we're obviously having the whole minor crisis, which actually, I wanted to mention the minor crisis thing, too, as usual. Aside from the issues I always mention with the minor term itself and the fact that the age of consent is well below 18 anyways, and people seem to not know the difference between the age of majority, legal adult, and age of consent laws, and how, like, all that's been merged together by people who really don't give a crap either way with all the fake social justice warrior bull crap. It's also all a distraction. Like, people have been bringing up the whole Steen situation, and I can even throw in the whole diddler thing, for years on end. Of course, way before I was ever born. And people just do their usual, just like with the satanic panic. They say they don't believe it, they don't believe this. Okay, so someone asked me something, and I don't really remember what I was saying. I don't think. But yeah, anywho, I know she mentioned, like, the Arabic dude saying that she needed to respect him because she's a woman, and how pretty much almost like the idea that women aren't even human, like what's about to go down with the coming beast system laws being pushed in the U.S., and how, even going back to the theory of evolution, it's like the woman, and even the white woman, wasn't considered a human either. Like, she was just about an animal as well. So, really, like, I don't know, what I always say, for somebody to be up, somebody else has to be down. In fact, when I think, like, back to, no, I'm screwing this up. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot for the past year or so is that if somebody really wanted to describe the beast system, they really wanted to describe to them, I would say it's like an open-air asylum. Like if the whole planet was the cash for kids system, or the human cash cow systems. That's how I really see it. But of course, with like the transhumanism and the advanced technology, and I would also think about the religious side to that. Like, you can already see in religion, like, all the different flipped around versions of the laws from especially the Old Testament. Like, chomoism has been normalized since the beginning of time due to flipped around religious doctrine. That's also why there's all the issues between men and women and the unchecked perversion issues that cause further divides, because most people, male and female, have been essayed. The parent worship that's caused generations of unchecked torture, and most people are abused. Most people have cognitive dissonance, and most people are abused. Most people raise themselves. All these issues are due to religion, and the beast system is going to bring that out even more, because it's going to be like these same laws that have been used to push all this stuff, and everybody's going to have to be under it. I'm still not really sure how they're going to get everybody to accept it. And then one of the things about it, just like Albert Pike said, is that there's not going to be in between. They want to eradicate those who are disillusioned with Christianity and atheists. And of course it's going to revolve around people who are actually trying to follow the way. And I'm not going to lie, I would say it's all really confusing. And I think one of the things about it is that you don't have a choice for anything. We're all really trapped. Like a lot of people, they think there's in between, but really you can't not pick a side. There only are two sides. But that's not even really the point. There's something else I was supposed to be getting at. But I do know one last thing I was going to say, though, is that it makes things make even more sense, especially with the whole celestial prophet lady and her talking about how, like, her cousin told her that her prophecies sound like some show called The Handmaid's Tale. Now, I've never watched it. Honestly, I haven't watched TV since before I was 10 years old anyways. But, like, from what I have heard, it makes a lot of sense. And then also the Hunger Games side, that too. But when I think about The Handmaid's Tale, I think about it's not Mormons. It really reminds me of what's the other thing called? People claim their House of Gomer too, just like Ashkenaz, but I can't remember what they're called. Oh yeah, Amish. Yeah, that. And they're a branch of Christians too. That even makes me think about the dude who was talking about how his friend's wife and kid got kidnapped by the Hare Krishnas in the Californian mountains or something like that. And that could even go back to another thing. They won't do their own war on drugs, and they won't do their own war on religion either. It's like Rashad Jamal and Nature Boy went to jail, but they just been running around kidnapping people. Holy Cross has been SAing people everywhere for always. It's like, shoot, they need to do a war in their communities on everything. But yet, they'll use state-of-the-art government technology. The same technology that people always say isn't real. That's just schizophrenic people's quote-unquote delusions. Because I remember hearing people say that there was a video released of, like, when they ran to go kidnap that Latin American president, and they used that technology that's like frequencies, and the people couldn't move or were throwing up blood or something like that while holding their ears. But yet that's the same technology that, of course, I mean, I already knew was real, but people are always saying it's just a schizophrenic delusion. Just like the targeted energy weapons or whatever it's called, but this is frequency technology, I'm pretty sure. It even makes you think about sick building syndrome. But anywho, I'm really forgetting something, I don't know what it was. Hold up. If I remember what the other thing was that I was last talking about, I'll just put it in the description. But going back to the Arab guy, because I'm looking at the notes again. So they said that they're hypocrites, they eat bad, they're gluttons, and they're materialistic, and they're cheap. But then other person said it kind of just depends. And then this makes me think about something else. So a guy who's the department chair of the Department of Energy in California, in like Santa Cruz area, I remember he was once talking about how his boss and co-workers mentioned how, of course, what's gonna happen is gonna be worse than not just the 2008 thing, which I don't know anything about that, to be honest, but I know the Great Depression is a pretty well-known thing. And it's going to be worse than that, of course. Which, I mean, yeah, when everything's said and done and the dollar falls as Babylon's judgment, it's not going to be something that people can come back from. And there's going to be even greater wealth gap. Just like how in areas where there's like more money, there's more people who are homeless. And it's going to be, well, it's going to be worse than that. You're either going to be really rich or you're going to really, really not have anything. And they were talking about like the stock market going down and just different things. So like I think it's called PG&E, and how just like the stats that were showed how like what's about to happen is going to be way worse than a lot of people know. And I think that was it.